Hi everyone, I hope you're well, staying safe and practicing social distancing. As you can see, I'm posting this video from the car. The current situation means that the home environment isn't ideal at the moment with two young children. It's bedlam, so as most people who are working from home with children can relate to, so that's been pretty emotional. However, I'm still getting a lot of questions on my timeline, despite the season being in shutdown, and obviously in tandem with that, there's also halting proceedings with regards to the Fantasy Football League. But people are still interested. People are still working on the assumption that the 2019-20 season will resume at whatever point that may be, and therefore are supposed to help maybe pass a little bit of time. They're already looking at some of the fantasy assets which may not have been available during the season run-in, but because of this pause and the extension to the league, it means that there are going to be a number of players who will be in a position to recover from injury, and therefore may come into consideration. I'll give you a little bit about the situation with regards to where we are in terms of a resumption of the league, and maybe touch upon a couple of the topics that have cropped up in the press in recent times, and then also I'll mention something with regards an update from FIFA, because the concern is that the majority, a lot of players' contracts are coming to an end towards the end of June. And there's an expectation that if the league does start up again, that we're going to go beyond that point. And there's also questions with regards to maybe those teams who have have already got players in place to come in early July. And some of the scenarios around well can teams actually rely on those players and bring them in? So FIFA have released a set of recommendations and guidelines. Again, it's not enforceable at the time. What they're saying is they would expect clubs and players and agents to hopefully come to some kind of amicable agreement given these unprecedented times. However, they are prepared to step in to try and act as a mediator to come to the best solution for all parties concerned. But I'll touch upon those at the moment. So the current state of play, with regards to resumption, there is no hard line from the Premier League officially. What they've said is, we will look to get things started off again when it's safe to do so. Now, I've heard several different scenarios with regards of when that could be. It's just a lot of conjecture, to be honest. At this point, nobody really knows. I think if it does, then it will more than likely be behind closed doors. And we've heard anything from the beginning of June to possibly anywhere up to mid-July. But we'll just have to see how the situation, if it's not changing day by day, it's certainly changing week by week. So that's one just to sort of sit back and bear in mind. What I did want to touch upon was comments from Udinese director Pierpaolo Marino this week. Now, what he said was there was an expectation with regards to, as far as he was concerned, that he was just awaiting for news of the Premier League to actually cancel the 2019-20 season. Now, for those that don't know and maybe is questioning why the director of Udinese would, carry any weight in this debate, Udinese are actually owned by the Pozzo family, who also have an interest in Watford. So that was reported by the Italian press, and he said something along the lines of, I would expect, I'm expecting the Premier League, despite the threat of UEFA sanctions, to follow the same route as the Belgium League, in which they awarded Club Brugge the championship just the other week. Now that's been flatly denied. Miguel Delaney posted a piece in The Independent saying that a spokesperson from the league has come out and said, that simply isn't true. And there's two major differences here between the Premier League and Belgium. One is, I think Club Brugge were around about 15 points clear at the top of that league with only one game remaining. So first and foremost, that the title was a foregone conclusion. And while Liverpool are certainly in the driving seat, and the expectation is that they will win, mathematically it isn't done and dusted. There are also still the complications in Belgium to be sorted out with regards to those teams who could potentially be relegated. So the only thing that's been set in place at this moment in time is the fact that Club Brugge are crowned as champions, which was the case anyway. I think in terms of resumption for the Premier League, we've heard from the likes of Burnley in terms of the financial implications. Should that season end now, and it'll have a dramatic impact on the clubs in the top flight. Now, Burnley alone, and they posted a statement just saying, we want to be transparent with our fans and just tell the severity of the situation and what we're having to deal with here. Now, they have calculated that should this season stop at this point, then that would probably cost them in the region of £50 million. Now, 5 million of that would come from the loss of match day revenue from their remaining home fixtures at Turf Moor, while in the region of 45 million would be lost through advertising. Now, they estimate that there will be clubs within the Premier League who would be at risk of losing possibly double that. So in the region of 100 million, so we're talking vast amounts of money here. And like I say, I think given the circumstances and the situations that we're all in, clubs and the Premier League, UEFA, the Football Association and the EFL will be doing everything within their power to hopefully, get some kind of a resumption in this season, like I say, but always bearing in mind, the safety of the players and fans and when it's safe to do so. So hopefully, it's one to watch, and I may be posting videos further down the line just with updates with regards to that. Now, touching back on what FIFA said, what they're hoping is ordinarily a player's contract would be tied to the end of a domestic season. Bear in mind there may be not just league games but potentially cup competitions. So they would come towards, ordinarily, they would end towards the end of June. And those players coming in would new contracts would begin at the beginning of July. Now, what UEFA have proposed is that those contracts be extended to basically fit around the unique nature of each specific league. So around the end of that domestic season, whenever that may be. We've seen teams like Bayern Munich return to training this week across in the Bundesliga. That gives a little bit of optimism that maybe their league is maybe a little bit closer to returning to play than possibly the Premier League. Whereas La Liga and Serie A, they're all in total lockdown at the moment. So there is no sort of light at the end of the tunnel with regards to that. So it'll be quite a... I think the contract situation at the minute will be fairly fluid. Like I say, if all parties can agree on this, and that might be the sticking point, and it's one again that we may have to cover down the line in another video, just to look at what's actually involved in that, and whether these guidelines and recommendations from can be implemented, both from a legal standpoint and too, from a financial perspective. If players are making big money moves and their expectation is, that they've got a large contract to go into July, so we'll wait and see on that one. We just hope that it happens. But going back to injuries, where it all stemmed from, and as with most things, there are some winners and some losers. Some of the big winners would be Tottenham and Jose Mourinho. We were expecting Harry Kane and Heung-Min to return to training around, with the squad at the beginning of April, mid-April. So, barring any kind of setbacks and any issues, then, if the season does resume, then I would fully expect those players to be back and involved with the squad. Now, for Heung-Min, he's actually out in Korea at the moment. He's undertaking some military service, and that's a 3-week program. And again, I'm getting a lot of questions on my timeline with regards to, well, is he in a position to be able to go and do this, to fulfill that requirement without putting himself in any harm? And what I suspect is, this military service is probably being shoehorned in because it's a good time for both the player, both the club, while this season shutdown is in place. It obviously means that later down the line, that requirement has been taken away. So he gets it out of the way. But obviously, they'd want Son to do that in an effective manner and not put him in any risk of causing any setbacks, any further damage to the arm. So without knowing the specifics of, one, the programme, and two, what's actually the stage he's at with the arm, we were expecting to see Son back with potentially maybe a lightweight protective cast on his arm, maybe restrictive training in terms of full contact. So it may be on this military course that some of the exercises could be adapted. He may be able to protect that arm in one way, shape or form. I know the medical team have said that they will be keeping in constant contact with the guys out there just to make sure that everything's all right. But, I'm more than confident, and they're confident, although you can never be, 100% certain within these types of environment, but Heung-Min will be going out there, and they're fairly, it's reasonable to assume that, he can come through that without any kind of adverse reactions. Certainly nothing that would set him back too long, because the worst case scenario, one, you don't want Son missing the remainder of the league, but also potentially if he suffers a major setback, then that could potentially have a knock-on effect going into the 2021 season. So I mean, it's certainly good news in that respect, and he's getting 3 weeks of good training under his belt, which is going to be good for his base levels of fitness. Manchester United, we're also looking at Marcus Rashford. He's came out in the last maybe 10 to 14 days, and he said things are progressing really well, particularly over the last month. He's made major leaps forward. He's progressing really well. And he was a guy that was probably flagged as a 50-50 doubt for Euro 2020, which of course we now know is being postponed until the summer of 2021. So he's a player that we were thinking, would be there maybe, May, June time-ish. So again, Marcus Rashford is probably going to get some good minutes under his belt during the run-in. And Paul Pogba is in a very similar situation with regards to him. He was another one. We're looking at maybe early to mid-April following a second surgical procedure on his ankle. So again, as long as there's no reaction, no setbacks, no problems, then Paul Pogba will be back in contention for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. However, there are a number of players who we are expecting to recover from injury, or should be very close, but they won't come into under consideration by their respective clubs, and that's because they haven't been submitted on the new squad lists. Now, typically Premier League sides submit their squad lists to the Premier League at 2 points. One at the beginning of the season, and second towards the end of January, at the end of the transfer window. Now, normally that takes place the day after, but because of the way the fixtures fell this season, the Premier League actually extended that deadline until February the 5th. And out of those new squad lists that were resubmitted, there are a couple of sort of key players who haven't been included in squads, and who potentially, could be fit in playing again, back on the training pitches with the group, but won't be able to play competitive football. Two of those guys come down at Aston Villa, and that would be Tom Heaton and Wesley. Now, both of those players suffered quite serious knee injuries on New Year's Day, ruptured anterior cruciate ligament problems. Now, typically what we're looking at is maybe 6 to 9 month recoveries for those types of injuries. Therefore, Dean Smith made the decision, and quite rightly so, based on the information that he had at hand, made that decision not to include those players. Now, what that allows a manager to do from that standpoint is, he can maybe take a couple of players who have been on the fringes of the squad, who've maybe impressed on the training pitches, been doing well for the under-23s, but progressed from this summer and have been knocking on that first team door. So what that allows the manager to do is to take out those players who are occupying a place, who at the time had no chance of returning, and swapping them with somebody who can bring something to the squad. So unfortunately, even if the season does resume and Heaton and Wesley are fit, they won't be in contention. Paul Dummett from Newcastle, he's in a similar situation. He suffered another major setback, had surgery on his hamstring, and he wasn't included in the squad lists by Steve Bruce. And in a similar vein is Jack Colback. Now, he had a knee ligament problem. Now, again, he's been out the first team picture for quite a while, but Steve Bruce had hinted and suggested that he may have considered including Jack Colback, in and around the squad just before he suffered an injury, but that setback is put him out of contention, and again, he hasn't been included in the Newcastle squad. But on a positive note, we could be looking at maybe West Ham, maybe looking at the likes of Jack Wilshere, who had surgery on his groin to remedy a hernia complaint. Liverpool with Nathaniel Clyne. Once again, we're talking about a fringe player who hasn't had much involvement within the first team, but he has been named in Jurgen Klopp's 25-man squad. So should injuries, suspensions, or whatever occur during that run, and then Nathaniel Clyne could effectively come into the squad. And also Arsenal can maybe look at the likes of Calum Chambers. He was another serious knee ligament injury, ACL. So depending upon how long this shutdown continues and when the season resumes, we may be seeing a slight influx of players in and around that. And elsewhere, we could be looking at maybe Lucas Torreira. He was 8 to 10 week timeline on an ankle fracture, and also Morgan Schneiderlin. He had minor knee surgery. I think it was to tidy up a little bit of meniscus. Now those players will be well on the road to recovery, so they shouldn't be too far away. Even if we're looking at maybe June to mid-July before they're back and fully training, hopefully on the training pitches. But again, we're in a position here where players are still working on their own, all through self-isolation, so we really don't know at this point in time. Anyway, so that was the first video. This is I'll look to develop this Instagram channel, so hopefully you like it. It just gives a little bit more insight and gives me a little bit more of an opportunity to tell you what's going on behind the scenes, and give a little bit of a broader view of the wider picture and how it might be impacting and influencing things. So if you liked the video, please leave a comment, give it a like. Also, if there's things that you'd like me to bring up, discuss, or if there are things that you didn't like, I'm very aware of the fact that I'm now touching 19 minutes, which is a lot longer than I had initially hoped. But yeah, feel free to put those in. You can always contact me on through social media, particularly on Twitter, where my handle is @BenDinnery. And if I can get maybe 2 or 3 videos out a week, particularly at this time when things are a little bit less hectic in terms of bashing out content, and with the leagues being down, then yeah, I'm very keen to do so. So yeah, thanks once again. Like I say, stay safe. I hope you're well, practice social distancing, and I will be back very soon. Thanks once again.